Today I got a very special interview for you from one of you guys who watch my YouTube channel. Stick around. Hey, thanks so much for watching this week. I really appreciate it. My name is Shannon Hernandez, radio broadcaster, podcaster, and podcast producer. And this week I have a very special interview that I want to share with you. It's an interview from one of you guys who watch my YouTube channel here on YouTube, and this person has been taking notes from my channel and utilizing and putting some of the things into practice into his own podcast. This week I talk with Vishnu Padmanabhan, I think is how you say his name. I'm sorry, Vishnu, if I got it wrong. But I had a really great time speaking with Vishnu. We spoke for about a good hour on a Google Hangout. In fact, we conducted this entire interview on a Google Hangout. So if you want to know how to create these types of interviews for your own podcast, you can go ahead and click right up here. There's going to be a link that you can click on, and it'll show you that exact setup. But this week, I wanted to talk with Vishnu about how to get started, really, but how to develop the style of your own podcast. I get emails and messages from a lot of the viewers of this YouTube channel who ask me, well, I'm doing this type of style, but I don't know exactly how to start. I'm doing it this way, but it's not really working out for me. And I certainly understand when it comes down to starting your very first podcast and not really knowing where to go and that style that you need to develop over time. So this week, I wanted to share a clip from that hour-long interview with Vishnu where he discusses his style, how he developed his style for his podcast, The Writer Geek Show. So he will talk about the challenges that he has faced prior to podcasting and the challenges that he faced after podcasting, and why some of these challenges shouldn't stop you from podcasting. And really, he shares just mainly his own story as encouragement for you, the podcaster, who's not quite sure where to start and exactly what to do. By the way, if you ever need something to help you out and somewhere to start and you don't know exactly where to get your equipment, there is going to be a link right up here that can direct you to my essential quick start guide that will help you get started. But in today's interview, I want to share Vishnu to all of you and to the world and how he has started his own podcasting journey. I hope you enjoy it.
When I get asked questions about like, well, how do I create a style? Well, I tell people you don't have to do a style like mine. That's particular to how I like to do it. So what you're talking about is from the beginning, after you've mastered all this technical stuff, now it's about developing the podcast of how you want to do it, your style.
Exactly. I think more than trying to imitate someone else, like everybody has their different style. One of the most popular podcasts that I keep listening to is called Stuff You Should Know. It's about the same kind of things that we do right now. Mm-hmm. They don't have any kind of, dramatic stuff. It's just two guys. And most of the times, if you just keep listening to them, it feels like they're just rambling and it's like a boring conversation. But they speak really good stuff. They get into they take a topic and they just go deeper and deeper into it, to the things that you've never known. And it's just a conversation. They just come in, maybe there's an advertisement in the beginning and the end. They just say, hey, this is Stuff You Should Know and we're going to talk about this. It's as simple as that. But there are some other ones which is real treat to the ears, where you have all this, background music and stuff. That's more like your style of doing it, right?
Right.
So you just have to settle down and decide how you want to do it. And we have few episodes where we have some dramatic stuff. I have tried to put some, mixing in. But that is good for that particular topic, right? You take some clippings and stuff. Suppose there was one episode which we did was about the moon landing and the events that led to it.
Right.
So in that, I think that was the first one you listened as well, right?
Yeah.
So in that, we have put some, background music and some narration and all that, because I felt that might fit that particular topic. And we had some audio clippings that we got from internet, which is related to that. So it's okay to try and test different ways of doing it. You don't have to stick to a specific style as well, because you are deciding how your podcast wants to be. It's reflecting your personality, right? So that's what I understood after watching, your content and stuff like that, where you should not hold your perfectionism to prevent you from starting off. If you're starting off, just start by, just start talking about whatever you want to talk about. That's what I realized.
That is a huge thing for a lot of people, because they, like you, they wanted it to be perfect. And And how do you develop that style, and how do you come up with those key elements that make a great podcast? And a lot of the times it's just going through, and I would imagine creating that repetition of creating a new podcast every single week, or maybe it's every 2 weeks, but knowing that you're figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and it doesn't have to be something that's a wild hit right off the bat. You just started.
Exactly. It's just like realizing your singing voice. So when you're starting to sing, right, you try to imitate the person that you admire the most. So when I was in college, Metallica was my favorite band. And you know that James Hetfield has a very special kind of a voice,
right.
The way he says, yeah, and all that. I try to imitate a lot. But then you realize that probably that's not your voice. And you settle down somewhere which is close to that, but which is not exactly that. But then you realize that is my voice, right? It takes a lot of playing and singing and all that. This is the same kind of a thing is what I felt. So without demotivating yourself, you continuously put episodes week on week. Somewhere you'll go and settle down thinking that, okay, you know what, this is what is comfortable, this is what works for me, and that's what you continue, right? So that's where we started. So we went into 4 episodes. Then I thought, you know what, probably this is time for an upgrade. You should get new gear. I think that was a time around when you had put a video on a basic podcast setup. You had, so you were showing some basic equipment that you had set up for one of your clients. You had this Yamaha mixer and I think Behringer headphone amplifiers and stuff.
Right.
So I thought, okay, you know everything about it. I just need to go and purchase them. So I got a Yamaha mixer for myself. I felt that, quality is something that matters. And I got these two. I got 2 of these microphones. These are Knox USB XLR microphones. Okay. One of my friend, my colleague, he was traveling to US for work and he was coming back in a couple of weeks. So I ordered these from US. You don't get it directly in India. This is very similar to the ATR 2100, which is very popular amongst podcasters.
Mm-hmm. And I'll leave a link to that in the show notes for people to check out.
Sure. So this is one of the best quality of microphones I've seen. So I purchased all this equipment. So if you look at my recording, my podcast, maybe from episode 4 or 5th episode or 6th episode, you will hear a drastic change in quality. So that's after I purchased these mics and the mixer.
Yeah, so it was clear. I mean, it probably boosted up your confidence when you upgraded this equipment and you were like, oh wow, this is a definite improvement.
Yeah, especially when you get a mixer, you get this monitoring headphones as well, right? Yeah. So till then you're just talking, you don't hear what you're saying when you're talking. But when we got these, I was like, man, now I sound like one of those guys who have these very cool podcasts, right? So that is one for me. It is like, if you're doing it, it should be really good. So this made a big difference. And my friends who are listening to my episodes, so initially it's just family and friends, right? You'll release something. Your first audience is going to be your friends and your family. So they start giving you feedback and stuff. So my friends were like, so they like the content. I mean, most of them say that they like it because they're friends. You don't get real feedback from them actually, right?
Right.
And when we started switching to this mics, the new ones, they were like, hey, your voice sounds bassy and you sound like, you're from some radio or something, man. It sounds really awesome. I was like, yeah, okay. So that made a difference. And it started sounding much different from what it was, and it actually boosted our confidence as well. So when I'm going and editing my podcast, I keep listening to it again, and once edited and I put it online, I keep listening to it also. I'm like, it sounds good, how can I make it better? Maybe change this setting, that setting. So you just play around with it, and wherever you feel comfortable, you just fix that setting and you just continue with it. So that's what happened with the equipment upgrade. So one challenge that I faced, as I said earlier, things are really expensive back in India, right? So most of the Indian podcasters, I would assume that they don't want to spend so much of money. And I would say that should not be something that should stop you from starting, right? You get really cheap USB condenser mics for maybe $3,000 in India. That is 3,000 rupees is somewhere around, I think, $50. Uh-huh. That's how it converts. I think 60 is the conversion rate, US dollars to Indian rupee. So if you spend around 3,000 rupees, which is not that expensive, you can get a normal condenser mic, which should get you started. You don't have to invest like 30,000 Indian rupees to just get started, if that is stopping you. So that's what I have to tell to anyone who's preparing to start. Don't think about making your audio and all those things perfect. Just settle down on doing it, become comfortable by talking into a microphone and listening back to it. So I had this issue of, man, my voice sounds so different from what I've heard previously, because the moment you start listening yourself from a different source, right, it sounds really weird and different initially. So that prevents you from thinking. It makes you think, this is how I sound. I can't put this out because I sound really crappy. This is what I felt initially. But then you get used to it. You're like, okay, this is how I sound and this is how it is. So once you settle down, it takes time. So just start off. Just have a plan. Start off. Don't think too much about making your podcast the most dramatic ones and adding all these sound effects. If you have really good things to say, that would be more than enough for your listeners to just stick on to your podcast.
And I think that is something that I should probably express more to the podcaster, is that the content is what is important. The content is what gets your podcast from point A to point B, especially in the listener's ears, is when they are listening. You want to get them from point A to point B. So that can be a challenge for a lot of podcasters out there, because they think, oh, I'm just going to start talking. And one of the things that I try to coach people on is saying, don't just have a conversation where you're wasting time within the first 5 minutes. You can spend a minute talking about what you had for dinner and how the wife and kids were doing, but the listener really wants to dive into what it is that you're going to teach them, and that's what I have noticed the improvement. I noticed it in the beginning whenever you started your podcast, Writer Geek show, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes, the description for this video recording. But that's what I had noticed, that you guys jumped right into the content, so it allows people to really invest themselves into the program itself. Now, when it comes to, you talked about challenges, and you were talking about those were some of the challenges that you were facing. But what were some of the challenges that you faced after you had started the podcast? Now, I think we're talking more about I guess delivery of content, the research of content, anything underneath that umbrella. What were some of the challenges that you faced after you started podcasting?
Yeah, so on the offset, if you listen to any podcast, right, this was my experience. I used to think, okay, so they have decided on this content to talk about. It's as simple as just learning whatever it is, reading about it, and probably doing some research and just coming in front of a microphone and talking. But you really realize when you start doing a show that how much of work actually goes behind the scenes to get one single episode out. And that might be the reason that most of the podcasts, they start and probably fade out after 3 or 4 or 5 efforts, because of the sheer amount of work it actually takes you to, continuously put out content week on week, especially if you have a day job like me. So this is what I've realized. If you're having a show, if you want to put quality content out, you need to really put in the effort, right? Be it doing the research or being, sticking to a schedule and all that stuff. So my biggest challenge has been, so we decided on a podcast which talks about, various different topics. We are not very much niche kind of a stuff, but we cover mostly things that come around science and technology and history and, all those kind of things. I thought, since we are keeping it across a wide category, like we are not sticking to science, it might be easy for us to kind of continuously find different topics and which are interesting, and we make a conversation around it. Once we started is when I realized, see, how much of a wide the topic that you choose, and you think that there is so much of subject to talk about. It's not that easy. There's really so much of effort that goes in. Even if you are not doing any great mixing, if you're just putting speech into your podcast, there's a lot of work that goes in. But that should not deter you. It should motivate you, in fact, to do much better. So what I do for my podcast, so thankfully I have my brother as my co-host. I didn't have to go and find someone else, right. And we really work well together in terms of conversations, because we have been having this as kids, right? It is just an extension. We are just putting it out for public to listen to. So we have been having this kind of conversation since so long. So that there's a comfort level there. So most of the times, we just decide, okay, you know what? We have made a list of episodes. So this is one thing I would suggest for everybody. you have to really plan your shows ahead of time, right? If you're thinking that, hey, tomorrow is the day, let's just jump into some topic, decide it, and just talk about it, it's never gonna work. You're just gonna fail right there, because the moment you start talking is when you realize, oh, probably I've not prepared well, or I don't know exactly what to talk about. It's not that easy. So what we have done before even we started, so we wanted to start with at least 3 or 4 episodes when we launch. So I think the preparation started around 2 months before we launched. We launched in June 1st of 2017 is what I remember. So our preparation started somewhere in April. So that is when I got a microphone. I decided, you know what, if I'm going to launch in June, how do I do it? So I worked backwards. So all these things I have learned through various, channels, and your channel as well, where you really need to plan what you're gonna talk, and how you're gonna schedule it down, and how many episodes do you have in reserve, so that, let's say one of the weeks something goes wrong, you couldn't record, you still have some buffer with you, right?
Yeah.
So these are the things that we plan. So we plan for a June 1st launch date, and I work backwards. Okay, if I have to launch on June 1st, how many episodes do I want to launch with? 3 episodes? Okay, then how much time do I need? What are those 3 episodes going to be? But that doesn't stop there. You should plan for at least 2 months worth of content. That's what something I decided. You might be comfortable with 1 month, or you might decide for 6 months.
Which is like 8. It's like 8 episodes.
Yeah, 8 episodes. So, and you don't realize how fast you might end up finish drying out your ideas that you already have. So if you're not planning at least a month or 2 months ahead of time, very soon you're going to run out of things to probably decide to put it into your podcast episodes. It's true for, at least for me, for different kind of niche podcasts, that can be even more difficult. You need to really plan out for maybe 3 or 4 months ahead of time, so that you stick to your schedule, right? So this was a big thing that I realized. So we decided we are gonna launch with 3 episodes. Let's decide the topic. So I have a notebook. I like things little analog way rather than putting it on some task management apps. So I keep a notebook.
I'm the same way. Yeah, I'm over here as you're talking. I'm over here. I've got this desk that you can write with dry erase, and I'm over here writing and erasing all the things that you're talking about.
So I don't know. Maybe it's just me. For me, things stick into my mind when I write it down rather than I type it down on a computer, right? So I got a journal, and we started putting on. So it's like, okay, something comes into my, okay, why don't we talk about this? We just jot it down, because otherwise you're going to forget about it, right? Yeah. So then we look into all these topics. We have different categories, and we make sure that every week it comes from a different category. It might be science today, tomorrow you talk about history, or you talk about something else. And we try to kind of sit down and discuss. Oh, my brother has different interests. I have different interests. It should not be like a conflicting interest. I always probably stick to science and other stuff. He likes to talk about different, human psychology, and probably about serial killers as well, which might probably not be my space. He likes to talk about it. So we sit down, we discuss, okay, let's do it across all the topics that we like. So we plan our episodes in such a way, and we know, like, okay, 3 episodes down the line, this is what we're going to talk. And some of our episodes might be too big to be contained. And this is one of the things I've realized, right? We human beings have very little attention span, especially in this age, right? If you put out an episode which is like 2 or 3 hours long, probably nobody's going to listen to it, or they might just drop off after 10 minutes or half an hour. There are some podcasts where it works, like Joe Rogan has his episode which go beyond 2 hours all the time, right? But we thought a sweet spot might be somewhere around 30 minutes, right? That's where we started, and we started putting out episodes. We got some feedback from our friends when it went to 35 minutes. They said, hey, it would be nice if it is just 25 minutes, because that is my commute from my house to my office. Yeah. That is when I start listening to it. And most of the people are like, that is a time where you can't do anything else when you're traveling, either when you're driving or you're coming in the subway or something. So that is the time they plug into podcasts and they start listening. So if it is like half an hour, they start listening when they're leaving home. By the time they're in office, they have completed listening to it. So we thought, okay, half an hour is a good time for us to, put the content and put it out. Some episodes require even more, going deeper into it. So we just split it into 2 parts. You don't have to cram everything into one part and just miss out on the good details. So to maintain the quality, we just say that, okay, this is the part 1, and you can listen to it down the line. Maybe not the next episode immediately. You just keep them hooked. You put it 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. So that's how we plan the content. Yeah.
I really hope that you enjoyed this week's interview with Vishnu, and he is giving you a little bit of confidence and assurance that developing your own style is going to take time, and that it's going to help build your confidence over time. So if you ever have questions about this video, or if you want to reach out to Vishnu, I'll leave the links to his social bios in the comments or in the section below in the show notes, and you can go ahead and get a hold of him there. But of course, if you have questions about anything, you can leave them in the comments. If you notice on my YouTube channel, I get back to all the comments on my YouTube channel as fast as I can. So it's my duty here, at least I feel, to get back to you and help you get started with your own podcast. And if you ever feel that saying and in your podcast is just really holding you back from really creating a great podcast, I've got a really good video that's right over here that you might want to check out. I just recently did, and it's gotten a lot of attention from people who watch this channel and has given them assurance on what they need to do when it comes to the ums and uhs in their podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Also, like it and share it with a friend. I would really appreciate it. Talk to you soon.